Come on in, take your seats, folks. Welcome, welcome. Friends, folks, and friends, foes, and folks who void warranties for fun. This is Pwn the Silicone, hardware hacking on a ramen budget. I'm Marco, this here's Jordan. Jordan, self-intro.
Yeah, so I've been in InfoSec for 13 years, 3 years on blue, and then I decided that it was way more fun to break things instead of worrying about how to fix them, so then I've been on red for the last 10. When I'm not doing that, I do concert photography primarily. I've been the head photographer of the Buffalo Chip in Sturgis for the last 13 years now, so if you've seen any images out of the Buffalo Chip Sturgis rally, especially a concert, there's a 99% chance it was mine. Married for 16 years, 2 kids, a dog, and I collect a lot of projects, but thanks to ADHD, I don't finish very many.
Hi everyone, I'm Marco. I've been working in security for 10 plus years. I'm an outdoorsman, been a pen tester and red teamer during that time, and I got my start in hardware hacking via car hacking. And if you're thinking of making that your first project, let me talk you off that ledge, friends. There's nothing worse than bricking your commuter car. The basics, tools and techniques. So this is by no means a definitive buyer's guide, but this will allow you to cast a wide net in terms of what you can actually hack. Starting at the top and then moving down, we got a bit driver set from iFixit. It's got everything you need. Tiny, cute little screwdrivers, pry bars, shims, picks, all the things you'll need in order to break apart that piece of electronics and get into its internals. Next, we have the CH341A SPI flash reader, also known as the poor man's flash reader. It allows you to clip it on a flash chip and look at all of its internals. Back in the day, we used to have to, before this was invented, we used to have to desolder the flash chip, and many times it would just break on you or you would destroy a trace in the process. This alleviates all of that concern. And to the bottom right, we have a bus pirate. The bus pirate is an extremely versatile tool. It allows you to communicate with nearly any interface imaginable. Tons of add-ons, things like UART, JTAG, SP2, SWDIO, all of that makes it easy for you. To the left of that, we've got a soldering station and a soldering iron. One important thing I'll say about soldering irons, it's important that you have variable temperature control. You want to be able to control the product that you're working with. It can be kind of dangerous if you don't. And then to the left of that, we've got pins and jumper wires. This will allow you to communicate to different interfaces. We're going to demo that in a little bit. And then finally, a multimeter. The multimeter allows you to obviously check voltage and also continuity. How else are you going to know what's 3.3 volts, what's 5 volts, etc. And everything on screen here comes up to about less than half of your conference ticket. So so congrats, you've spent more money than listening to me talk about it than setting up your own lab. Capitalism's wild. Onto the Cadillac of tools.
So this is going to be kind of the nice-to-have stuff. You're going to see a lot of this when you start getting into it. Things that are going to look cool. You're going to be watching videos. They're going to be using this kind of stuff. So you might think you need it, but quite honestly, it's probably things that can wait until you're a little bit more mature in your adventure. So first we got like a JTAGulator. Really nice when you're working with JTAG interfaces. It also will do like SPI, debugging, a few other things. But it can really make working with those type of debugging ports a little bit easier. Up next, we got a video microscope. Really handy if you're trying to read like silk screen on different types of chips. You can take video of it. You can also take photos for referencing later, also putting in your reports. It also helps with when you're trying to do surface mount soldering of very small components. Next is going to be an oscilloscope. Again, it's kind of one of those things where there's definitely a lot cheaper out there. There's actually some projects for about 70 bucks you can solder and make your own. Very basic, but it's again something that you don't really need as you're starting out. Next is going to be like a J-Link Mini. That's going to be a good debugging tool, especially when you're working with ARM-based chips. Flipper, we all are probably familiar with that. Some of us probably kickstarted that. It really combines a lot of tools into one. So like Proxmox 3 was a big one. So you have your NFC reader, you have sub-gigahertz. There's also just GPIO output, so you can add all kinds of functionality. So there's Wi-Fi. A couple weeks ago, I saw someone made the Flippenheimer. So if you want a Geiger counter for your flipper, that is available. And then lastly, the HackRF with a PortaPack. So HackRF is an SDR board, does a lot of advanced stuff. You combine that with a PortaPack so that way you don't have to necessarily always have that connected to a computer. Has a lot of additional functionality, especially just on the go. If anything, it's a big step up from a flipper in terms of capability when it comes to just SDR and software-defined radio hacking. But one of the biggest things for hardware hacking is soldering. I know for myself personally, that was probably the one biggest barrier to entry because I was really scared of it. I got into hardware hacking in 2001 thanks to the original Xbox. I grew up in small town North Dakota. My graduating class was like 20, and I just remember sitting in a computer course, and the guy beside me was telling me how his brother's roommate was able to save games on his Xbox to a hard drive, which at that time wasn't a thing, and it kind of blew my mind. So I'm like, well, how does he do it? And he's like, I don't know. And so that went down a big rabbit hole. I learned about mod chips, and everything I saw was you need to solder, and that kind of stopped me in my tracks because I was like, I don't want to ruin my $300 gaming console. So took it to a local electronic guy. He soldered it. I'm like, I have this chip, I have this Xbox, and these things. Can you make it all work? And he's like, yeah. Watched him do it. I'm like, oh, that's easy. A few years later, working on an Xbox, plugged some power in, got a big spark from the power supply, and I was like, oh, geez. Tried to hit the power button, nothing would happen. Opened it up, and the solder joint for the AC adapter actually blew off. So half of it was connected, half of it was not. And so I was like, well, it's already broke. So I used the soldering iron that I got from Radio Shack when I went out of business and soldered the one lead, just put a huge glob of it on, plugged it in, powered it on. It didn't start on fire. And I was like, well, that was easy. And then I proceeded to try to find everything else in my house that I could solder, much to the dismay of my wife. But the thing is that it's just something you have to do. So some of the things we talked about, like a variable soldering iron, it's important because, again, you're able to kind of control a little bit of your final product, but also variable a lot of times will allow interchangeable tips. So if you have like a tip that you ruined, or you find that like, I want a finer tip or I want a flatter, you can just change those out. It's really cheap. You don't have to go buy another soldering iron. And they're like 45, 50 bucks on Amazon, so not even that expensive. Hot air stations are nice, especially if you're gonna be desoldering a lot. And then some of the other things you're gonna need, you're gonna see like lead or lead-free or flux core solder. Either or is gonna work. The biggest thing I would say pay attention to is the diameter. You're gonna get some really thin stuff, which is really good if you're doing just small component surface mount stuff. And so that's probably the biggest recommendation that I would have, is just pay attention to the diameter and also pay attention to the project you're gonna be doing. And then lastly, some flux. It makes it sometimes easier to get the solder to actually adhere to your product. And then also, you're gonna want something to remove the solder as well. So a lot of times people will get, I prefer a solder sucker. Solder wick is gonna be a lot cheaper, but apparently I'm not good enough to ever get the wick to work. So I prefer the solder sucker. And then lastly, some tip tinner, because if you have a dirty tip, a lot of times like the solder just won't like warm up enough to where it won't melt, and you end up possibly ruining traces or your soldering pad or something like that.
Yeah, speaking of dirty tips, the smell of burnt plastic and mild panic is all par for the course here. So if you haven't burned yourself on a soldering iron, you haven't been branded into the community just yet. Software tools. Let's start at the left here with Binwalk. Binwalk is a firmware analysis tool. It allows you to extract embedded files. Everybody uses it in the hardware hacking community. It's a great tool. It allows you to see from a high level embedded files, and anything from JPEGs to encryption keys. And up at the top here, we have 010 Editor. 010 Editor is a paid-for hex editor. It's like every other hex editor, except with those embedded files that get opened up, it allows you to open up any file type, which is great because then you don't have to download sketchy tools from another site, from unreliable site, and it's all in one place. Then at the right, we have Atify OS, which is essentially the Kali Linux of hardware hacking, all the tools, again, in one place. And then at the bottom, we have PicoCom. PicoCom is a Linux utility. It allows you to communicate over serial, which we will demo later on. Uh-oh, Jordan, how did this get in here?
So about that, when we were looking at different templates, I came across this one. I thought it looked really cool. I liked the way this slide looked, but I didn't know what I would use it for. And I wanted to include it in my slideshow, and so I did. And that's it.
Things to look out for. Identifying components. Why do we do that? We're hackers. We want to enumerate as much as we can. We need to know the capabilities that a board has in order to determine how we're going to attack it. And how do we do this? Use your eyeballs. There's little silk screened print on the PCB. Look it up, give it a Goog. There's also characters on each of the chips. Also, give it a Google. Right? There's tons of websites out there, fcc.gov, mouser.com, Tech Info Depot. There's tons of them. If you're interested in that, check out the notes after the presentation. And then, of course, we want to look for interfaces, things like JTAG, UART, et cetera. We want to be able to communicate with the device as quickly and get root as easily as we possibly can. Down below that, we have active and passive circuits, circuit board components. Active requires external power to function, whereas passive does not require external power to function. However, it does store energy. And that's important because we're working with electricity. If there's any concern as to whatsoever what you could be burned or blown up by, it's down at the bottom right.
Yeah, so identifying components is important for those reasons because, you know, as we see with passive, that we see things like transformer, capacitors, things that store energy. Again, early on in my hardware hacking career, there was, if we all remember the little point and shoot cameras, specifically like the Sony ones, they were like this thick, they had that little lens that would pop out when you turn it on, and then when you turn it off, it would come back, and sometimes it would get a little just kind of tilted and then never go back in all the way. So that happened. I'm like, well, I'll just open it and, you know, force it back and it'll be fine. So I open it and I saw a little kind of metal spongy thing and intrusive thoughts kicked in. And I'm like, I don't want to touch it. And then my whole bottom jaw went numb. So yeah, I still don't know what that was. But again, it's not the time to let the intrusive thoughts run wild. Talking next about identifying components, this is one of my favorite ones whenever I get into a new project, is looking for the SPI flash chip. Because it's non-volatile, that's where OS bootloaders are stored, that's going to be where the firmware is stored, that's where the fun things are. Sometimes they'll be encrypted, but also not. So the other important thing to note is that we've pointed out is that there is a dimple on most of those chips. Actually, if you look at your badges, there is one on it. So if you happen to have a CH341A at home, go ahead, go home, clip onto this, dump the firmware, see what's on it. But there's a little dimple on it, and that tells you what pin 1 is because each pin has a specific function. As you see on the data sheet that we've provided, that particular chip, that is the pin out of it. So like there is a ground chip, there is a VCC pin, so that's going to be like 3.3 volts, 5 volts, whatever, 1.8. But the point is that you don't want to give it 5 when it wants 3. So it's important to know that kind of stuff. Also, just kind of how that chip functions, because sometimes the data sheet will tell you if that chip is encryptable or not. And then moving on here, we have JTAG, which is going to be a port a lot of you will come across, hopefully. It just stands for Joint Test Action Group. It's actually a non-standardized debugging port. It's basically a way that as the board was being manufactured and developed, that's just how the company was able to interface with it. They would put firmware on it, extract it. They could see what the different chips were doing at the time and be able to diagnose and debug. The thing is that with a non-standardized port like this, it could be 8 pins, 10 pins, 12, however many they want it to be. And so for that reason, it can be a little difficult sometimes to work with, hence why like something like a JTAGulator is kind of, you know, a useful thing. Other times you may also run across like the bottom picture that we have where they'll kind of just solder over it. So again, if you're a soldering wizard and have figured out how the wick works, you could just take away that solder and you have a JTAG port that you can work with. But there are some common things that you will find on most JTAG ports. So things like your data in, data out, a lot of these are going to be just kind of standardized things. Again, it may not, some of these may not always be there, but this is kind of the stuff that more or less I would expect to be. And so this is, again, non-standardized port, but these are kind of some of the things that I would expect to find on most, if not all.
So Jordan talked about JTAG, which is a non-standardized interface, but UART is a standardized interface. It stands for Universal Asynchronous Receive Transmit. It's asynchronous. It communicates over with a baud rate. Baud rate is a signal speed measurement. It's represented by a number. It's simple, it's versatile, and it's commonly used on all sorts of electronics, everything from pacemakers to routers to microcontrollers, literally everything. In the picture below, we have a USB to TTL tool. That's how we interface with the UART. And it comes in 3-pin and sometimes 4-pin configurations. RX, which stands for receive, TX, which stands for transmit, and ground. And then an occasional 4th pin, which could either be 3.3 or 5 volts. This is a demonstration of just a router we actually found around the office. I had no prior knowledge about it, but at the top right, see, we can see the connection here with the UART interface. Ignore my hastily soldered pins there. I'm going to plug it in. And then up at the top left, we've got PicoCom about to run. It shows up on my machine as USB, a TTY USB 0. I'm sorry, it's very small up there. And then a baud rate of 115/200. Plug in our USB TTL device, and then boom, we see some garbled nonsense. This is actually the device running the boot. So this is the boot sequence. Pretty shortly after that, we will see human readable language. Okay, some of this stuff you can glean is sensitive, is important. However, the real juicy information comes from about right here. This is OpenWRT. OpenWRT is a Linux distro for embedded devices, but I am root, believe it or not, already, and that only took a couple pins soldered and a device you can buy for $10. If we were bad guys and we stole this from somebody, we would find out their password really easily. I'm basically showing all the services and filtering for host APD, which is a Wi-Fi access point daemon. And then I'm looking for a config file. Inside the config file is our SSID and password, which is password 123, whoever was creative enough to make that password. And essentially you're root on this device and it's owned.
So up next, we're going to just kind of touch on software-defined radio, because when you start getting into hardware hacking, there's going to be a lot of things with IoT. IoT devices have a lot of wireless signals with them, whether they be Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, Zigbee, whatever. Thing is that there's really only two that I would say most people should ever pay attention to as far as SDR kind of hardware. Primarily that RTL SDR, just because it's cheap. It's a good way to get started into it. It can do a lot of the stuff you need it to do. The Hack RF is nice, especially if you compare it with a Portapack, but I equate a lot of this stuff to kind of like, we're gonna get into the photography analogy now, because I started out with a Rebel XTI like way back in the day, and you know, a lot of times you take a picture, people would look at it like, oh, you have a really good camera. The thing is that I would invest more in my lenses than I did the camera to begin with. So I had like an $800 camera with a $2,500 lens because that prolonged my use of the actual camera itself. The lenses kind of did a lot of the work for the camera as far as making good, sharp images. And that's kind of what I equated to this. If you get an RTL SDR, it's cheap, but then you can invest in more antennas because the antennas will allow you to get into different frequencies, wavelengths like 2.4 gigahertz, 700 megahertz, whatever. But the thing is that it allows you more functionality if you spend the money on like different antennas versus just dropping a bunch of money on, a hack RF1, not quite sure what to do. You have one antenna, and so it kind of limits what you could do with it in a sense.
Common vulns and exploits. Firmware analysis, why do we do it? Well, time and again, firmware has proven to be the weakest link in hardware. It contains some of the juiciest information, things like hard-coded credentials, auth tokens, encryption keys. So we like to check to see if the device requires firmware to be signed. If it doesn't, there's an opportunity to write our own firmware and upload it to the device, and that can either expand or take away functionality at will, pretty much. And as we can see in the pic below, this is a firmware exploit for iOS, checkrain. I use it literally all the time during iOS pen tests. That's how we get root on an iOS device. And up next, we have an example of firmware extraction.
So for this, we have a Wyze camera that I had laying around, and we're going to be using the CH341A because I do love that little thing. They're like 10 bucks. But there we've got the SPI flash chip. And then from there, we're going to be making sure that we have the right orientation, check the dimple. But also on these particular ribbons, you'll kind of notice that there's a, right on the edge, there's a pink wire on that ribbon. That signifies on that ribbon which one is for pin 1. So it's important that you kind of make sure that that pink wire also lines up with pin 1 because then you kind of know the orientation of that clip. But there we've got a good clip on it. And then from there, we'll just plug it in. If you look at the Wyze camera board, it'll also light up once I plug it in. So the CH341A can also pass voltage over. It's capable of 3.3 as well as 5, so just make sure. And then next, I'll jump over to Neo Programmer, which is essentially how we're going to dump that firmware. And so one of the things where you're doing this is you're also going to want to look at the silk screen. What kind of chip is it? So in this particular case, it was a Giga device. And then we're going to kind of go to the closest model number that we have listed here. And then we're just going to read it. And then from there, we just kind of check. Again, similar to the UART, there's going to be kind of some gibberish at the beginning, but we want to see if we have human readable text because then we know whether or not we actually have a good read. So there we got the human readable text. From there, I'm going to dump it, or I'm going to extract it, send it over to Kali. Once I'm in Kali, I'm going to use binwalk just to see what's in it. I saw that there was going to be a squash FS file, which is going to be just kind of a compressed file system. So I'm going to use binwalk-E to extract. And then from there, I'm just going to kind of go into here and just show the, it's extracting, because if you've never done a firmware extraction, there's a lot in a firmware, especially for how small it is. There's a lot of files. So really, I think this took about 5 minutes, but through the magic of editing, I'm not going to make you sit through all of that. Just a little awkward silence, that's all. But once we're done, we're going to go through, just going to kind of show how much it extracted, just how many files there really were within there. So again, a lot of things. From there, I kind of had already queued up just some of the interesting stuff. So, we have some IoT files, we have Etsy Shadow right there, and then just kind of some interesting things. But the thing is that not all of it was really apparently easily readable. There were some ELF files, some other things that we could open it in Linux, but I don't have that kind of time and I don't care to always remember how to do it, so I throw it into 010 editor, because if you throw the kitchen sink at it, it will open it. And so from there, putting some ELF files and some other things. This one in particular, we were able to see that the SSID that it had last connected to was Hybrid Studios, which is my home Wi-Fi. And then the password I had to redact because I don't trust a single one of you. And then we have just the Wi-Fi password. We've got the camera encryption ID in there. We've got hard-coded AWS buckets, hard-coded IPs that are in here. So if you ever want to be like, where's this sending things to? Where's it saving to? What do I want to block? It's a good way to find out. So a lot you can learn through firmware extraction.
Common hardware vulnerabilities. Well, we've already discussed, first of all, let me just preface this by saying there's no such thing as OWASP top 10 hardware vulnerabilities. Before one of you pipes up, I know there's IoT, there's an IoT OWASP top 10, but it hasn't been updated since the Obama administration. So first on the list here is debug interfaces, which we've already discussed, things like SWDIO, UART, JTAG. Then we've also discussed firmware exploits, check-grain, and then physical attacks, which Jordan demonstrated with the CH341A tool. And one more attack that I would want to highlight are side channel attacks. This gives, basically it's when an attacker takes advantage of of a machine's information exhaust pattern to gain unauthorized access. On the bottom right, we have platypus. Which, by the way, your exploit isn't cool unless somebody's made a poorly drawn cartoon of it. But platypus exploits the running average power limit interface to infer encryption keys from memory. So it's not exploiting the system, the file system directly, it's exploiting a side channel. Hope that clicks. On to the next one.
So getting back to a little bit for the SDR stuff, we're going to look at a Bluetooth vulnerability called breaktooth because, again, you're not a really cool serious vulnerability unless you have a cool name and a logo. And so in this case, this was actually kind of a roll-up of 26 different CVEs for Bluetooth, ranging in just kind of different versions of it from 3.0 to 5.2. But the one we have highlighted is for the ESP32, specifically for the Rover kit, because it's really common in IoT stuff. But these particular things, basically they can kind of lead to arbitrary code execution or else just kind of like putting the device into like a permanent boot loop. And so the only way to really like fix it is to do like a hard reset, kill the power. So it's kind of like I wouldn't qualify it necessarily as maybe a party trick, but depending upon what you're trying to do with it, it could lead to some, just kind of fun stuff. But there is a sniffer that they had published as well as just kind of the attack stuff for it. So I mean, we've used some of this in our own pen tests. It is kind of interesting when you see it.
Project ideas. So where do you find hardware? I'm sure everybody in the room has a drawer somewhere of just outdated phones or crappy hardware, right? That's just completely unusable. But you can find broken or refurbished items pretty much anywhere. You can go to Goodwill, you can find them at garage sales, even free stuff on social media, Evil Bay, Amazon, Back Market. I've been advised by my employer not to encourage dumpster diving, but who knew you could get in trouble for recycling someone else's bad decisions?
Yeah, the other thing too is that like there's a lot of auction sites, especially around here in the Twin Cities. Not too long ago, there was a business that was going, out of business in Minnetonka, and so they sold just like business-to-business POS systems, and for fun, I put a $15 bid on 3 of the lots. Each lot had like 50 just credit card readers and hand credit card things, and I'm like, whatever. I won all 3, and so I was like, I don't know what to do with all these, but like they ranged from like things that were like just from the early 2000s to things that I still see in use today. And so, again, a lot of them, I don't know what to do with it. So I meant to bring some today. I'm going to bring some tomorrow. So if you see me and you want a credit card reader, hit me up. I want to get rid of them. Otherwise, I'm just going to throw them in the dumpster.
I would dumpster dive for that.
But one of the best ways to learn something is to work towards something that excites you. So if, a lot of us, when we learned how to code for the first time, it was Sally wants a tax calculator for her shirt business, make her this calculator. And I don't know about you, but I was never really excited to make Sally that calculator. So instead, something like a USB traffic sniffer, that excites me because it's something that I can also use to either show other people, I could use it in my day-to-day job, This particular one is for a breadboard, so if you're afraid of soldering, still new to it, it's something that you can still do. Plus, breadboarding in general is kind of an important skill to learn as you're prototyping things, because nothing is more annoying than soldering a bunch of stuff and then realizing your mistake later, and then having to desolder a bunch of things. So with this, again, you can sniff just USB traffic with Wireshark. See if things are really encrypted, because just because the salesman said it was doesn't necessarily mean it is. I mean, we've all been burned by that promise before. There are also versions where you can solder them, so it makes it a little bit more compact. So there are a couple out there, but that's one that I would definitely encourage.
Learn how to solder, people. It's not that scary.
And then SAO badges. We all got one today. And actually, there is a station on the other side of that wall. I highly, highly encourage you all to go check it out, especially if you've never done soldering before. You will not get an easier opportunity to try it than today, because someone is there to guide you. It is simple through-hole soldering, and when you're done, you get a little Marauder chip, this thing right here. If you're familiar with Marauder, it's kind of similar to like a Wi-Fi pineapple in a way. So you'll get something cool out of it as well. But there is an SAO standard, so there's a pinout for it. So if you ever want to learn how to make your own, it's really fun, because for one thing, you can learn how PCB boards are made, and then you could hand them out at HackerCons, watch everybody play with your cool little thing. Sometimes they're just blinky lights, which are awesome. Other times, like the badges we got today, have a lot of functionality. The Aviation Village at DEF CON one year, if you plugged it in, it was like an ADSB2 reader, so you could see airline traffic overhead. I mean, quite literally, it's whatever your imagination can come up with.
It's how I learned how to solder. It's instant gratification. Highly recommend it.
And then another one that is obviously near and dear to my heart, because it's how I got my start, is just game console hacking, specifically the original Xbox, because it is very hacker friendly. It's still being actively developed for today. Actually, I think about a year or so ago, Serbius came out for it, which was a completely new rewritten BIOS for it. Expanded the hard drive. Originally, it topped out at 3 terabytes. Now it can be up to 24, I believe. But you can take out the DVD drive, make a slim Xbox version. It offers a lot of just variable difficulty too for the new person, because it can range from just desoldering the clock capacitor, which is known to leak, and then there's important traces around it that if it is allowed to leak, can actually render the whole Xbox useless. But you can also get HDMI breakout boards for it that will solder directly onto the NVIDIA graphics processor and just have upscale 1080p output just natively. And so, I mean, it's literally sky the limit. You can add wireless controllers to it with a Raspberry Pi Pico, so you can just have completely wireless controllers for it. And when you're done, you get to play video games. So again, fun project.
Additional resources. I cannot recommend Matt Brown enough. He's amazing. He teaches you everything in depth. He also shows you how to fail and how to keep persisting. Like I said, can't recommend him enough. He was kind of my entryway into small devices. So do you want to talk about The Godfather?
Yeah, so Joe Grand, for a lot of you that have been in this scene for a long time, he's also known as Kingpin, member of the Loft Group, which in the early 90s was invited to talk before Congress and let them know that we can't whistle into telephones to launch nukes. So lately, he's also the inventor of the JTAG, among some other things. But lately, he's been really doing a lot of like crypto wallet hacking for the hardware wallets, which has been really cool because those are very secure devices. CyberMentor is another one, which is actually the TCM Academy. They do have a IoT as well as a hardware hacking course, but on their channel, they have a lot of free stuff as well. And then lastly, if you like if you need like a little bit of spice in your life with an Italian flair, there's also Make Me Hack, which if you go through tutorials and they tell you, put point A to point B and then continue on, but they don't explain why, and you're like, but why did I do that? That's the guy for you. He really will deep dive into just concepts and things like that so that you have an understanding of why you're doing what you're doing, which is really helpful because it's one thing to have a tutorial that just kind of walks you through and handholds you the whole time, but it's another to actually have a tutorial that will teach you so that way you can apply it to other things. So, but yeah, those are the 4 that we probably would recommend more than anything. But yeah, Matt Brown is definitely nice because he will show you, when he fails, which is a very key thing because you don't always get it right the first time. And he has a pretty average or a pretty maintained cadence to how he updates his channel.
As far as books go, IoT Hacking Handbook is one I reference for almost all my pen tests regarding hardware. Can't recommend it enough. And then Open Circuits is more of a, let's just say, coffee table book. It shows pretty much the split version of every single hardware component that you can come across. If you're interested in what it looks like underneath the surface, that's the book that you would go to.
And the nice thing too about open circuits is that if you're ever curious of like, what does a capacitor do? What does this resistor do? What does this mystery sponge on the camera do and why did it shock me? That is a good book to also reference because it'll give you a quick little synopsis of exactly what that component does. And then lastly, Practical IoT Hacking, which is, as far as I'm concerned, is a companion to the Hardware Hacking Handbook because they are kind of just one and the same. They are very much, a yin and yang. So if you get one, get the other, do yourself a favor because like Marco said, I reference both a lot because there's a lot of times where you're just going to forget things and it's just much easier to reference them. But lastly, and then I also want to make sure, not paid by them or anything like that, we're not shilling.
They're not sponsored.
But I've been a subscriber to them for about 2.5 years and I love it because I think it's about $45 a month. You'll see it's $59 on here because of the fact that if you're not a subscriber, there's an upcharge once they actually send it out. But it's like a blind box. But every month they'll send you a new hardware project. Some of it will be really cool. Some of it you're like, I don't really care about this. But the nice thing is that, one, you'll have spare parts if you don't care about it. But they also kind of go into different, kind of like explain things as far as like, this month we're going to be talking about SAO badges. And so they'll kind of give you a little bit of a history of an SAO badge. They'll kind of, start breaking down what it is so you can understand the concept of one. And then they'll walk you through how to actually put together that project. But it's a really fun way just to kind of, if you also like, I want to get into this, but I don't know what to do. There's also like Amazon.com has a bunch of soldering projects as well. If you're learning to solder, they have like a Christmas tree with LED lights. That's really easy to make. But again, if you're new to soldering, it's really helpful. You can make a radio. I mean, they're like $10. Yep. But with that, kind of concludes the presentation. The one thing that we hope that you take away from this, though, is just an ability to get over any fears you have towards hardware hacking, because it's one of those things that is very intimidating to start because you might be afraid of ruining something, you might be afraid of destroying, and you might think it's expensive. It's not. You're going to burn yourself, you're going to ruin things, but hopefully you learn from it. Give it a shot. There is a soldering station over there where you can actually put some stuff together. Go do it, try it. If you actually do it, I'd love to see it, especially if it's your first time. We can compare, my terrible solder joints to yours and see who wins. But seriously, give it a try. You're not going to find an easier, way to learn.
Thank you. Do we bow?
Yeah, I don't know if they give us flowers or a free beer or what.
Questions? Anyone? Back there, green shirt. I have not had the opportunity to do any chip glitching, but I am aware of it. It's an awesome attack. Yeah.
So usually the default one that comes with is going to be good for most stuff, but there is a finer tip one, especially if you're doing like smaller components. There also is a flat angled one, which usually is better if you're going to be doing like solder removal, like removing components. And again, I've been told that it's supposed to help with the solder wick. I can't figure that witchcraft out though, so.
You could get the job done with any one of them, really, but I mean, it's kind of a dealer's choice through preference too.
And then also with a lot of those soldering irons, Hacko makes a lot of those tips. A lot of times those will be compatible with other soldering stations as well, so don't think you have to stay brand specific.
Steve. Let it run, let it solder? Oh, I'm a leaded guy myself. I don't care about fumes. It doesn't. I just don't breathe, while I'm doing it. That's That's my choice.
I guess I like unleaded. It's just easier to work with.
All right, well, thanks everybody.
Thanks for coming.